very good evening to all the participants. Sorry for the delay. There was some technical issues. Now, President of GSTPAM, Mr. Dinesh Tamre, will welcome all of us.
Good evening, friends. Sorry for the delay. Actually, it was because of the very good response from all of you. The webinar has got full, and our today's speaker could not log into the webinar because it was full, and we had to request few of you to log out and join through YouTube. To come to the webinar, I first of all welcome you for the today's session, which is on the subject of levy and classification, levy of GST and classification. And I'm thankful to our today's faculty, Mr. Deepak Bapat, for accepting this today's invitation for being speaker for today's webinar. I hope you are safe at home, and in this difficult time, when this coronavirus is hovering upon us and we are made to sit at home, this kind of online programs, learning programs, was utmost necessary for all of us. And for that, I must recognize the efforts taken by Mr. Hiral Shah and Ms. Sejal, because of these two assets. I would call them assets of our association. Because of them, this webinars have been possible. So I thanks them a lot on behalf of all of you. हम अगर लाइब्रेरी में होते तो बड़ा राउंड ऑफ अपलॉड्स करते थे, but we are really going to give you standing ovation when we'll get an opportunity. Thanks a lot, Hiral and Sejal. You all must have come across the some of the I would say the facilities or the some amendments made by the government for filing 3B and those all things. Exactly, those are not extensions, but they have waived off the late fees in respect of 3Bs up to they have given the dates, and that has made our task easy. There is some issue. I have been made aware by or informed by some of our members that we should represent why they want interest at the rate of 9% on the taxpayers whose turnover above 5 crore. There is another thought to it, is that when these taxpayers could do business during the period of lockdown, why they cannot pay interest of 9%, which is concessional? That is another thought which is there. So we are going to think on that. They have somehow relaxed the rule 36(4), wherein we cannot claim ITC beyond above 10%. That they have relaxed, and they have amended the provision accordingly so that you can consider that 10% restriction cumulatively up to September 20. So these are the few amendments or the reliefs given by the government. Now, without encroaching upon the time of our today's speaker, Bapat sir, I welcome him for today's session. I hope that you all will enjoy and get educated with this subject. Levy is his specialization, and therefore I had requested him for this subject. Let us start with the webinar. Thank you, Sejal, and thank you, sir, for coming on the webinar. Thanks.
Thank you, President. So, and now we request Mr. Praveen Jadhav to introduce our speaker for today, Advocate Deepak Bapat.
Thank you, Sejal. Thank you, Sejal. Today's speaker is going to be Advocate Deepak Bapat, sir. He has been practicing since 1981 exclusively on sales tax up to the tribunals and high courts. He was the president of the Sales Tax Tribunal Bar Association Maharashtra during the year 2014-15 and 2015-16. He was also the president of the Sales Tax Practitioner Association of Maharashtra during the year 2007-8 and 2008-9. He was also the vice president of the Association of Tax Lawyers of India during the year 2013-14 and 2014-15. He was also a member of National Executive Committee of All India Federation of Tax Practitioners during their 2014 and 2015. He has also presented various papers on sales tax and allied laws for seminars. He is also a writer of articles in Sales Tax Reviews published by the Sales Tax Practitioner Association of Maharashtra. He is also a writer of short publication on works contracts Reenacted Act 1989. In 2005, he was lecturer on MBET Act for departmental officers on behalf of PricewaterhouseCoopers PwC. He has delivered lectures at seminars and study circles meetings on sales tax, VAT, GST all over Maharashtra. Presently, he is the vice chairman of National Joint Action Committee of GST Professional. He is also an advisor to various trade manufacturers association. With this short brief introduction, I would like Bapat sir to take over the uh, seminar.
Yes. Thank you, Praveen, for the nice introduction.
Welcome, sir.
I also thank at the beginning to the president of our association, Mr. Dinesh Tamde, as well as the two heroes, I can say, for this webinar, excellent arrangement of thereof, and thereby a person like me, who is always away from this technicalities, but they made me to learn all these things. So I thank to both of them as well. And to ever smiling Mr. Alok, I'm happy to see you here. With this, friends, I will start the topic allotted to me, that is levy and classification of GST. As far as the levy of tax is concerned, we are concerned basically only with section 9 of the CGST Act and section 5 of the IGST Act. In a way, the topic is very small, and in a way, it is very large. Therefore, what to cover and what not to, that's why first of all, what I did, apart from reading those sections, I straightway go to the dictionary meaning. As far as the levy is concerned, who has to levy? By practice, we know levy means by the authorities. Still, dictionary meaning says there are three meanings given to the word levy. First one is to collect taxes. Second one is money collected as taxes. Do not take any other meaning. Money collected as taxes means what is that? That is official collection only. Then third one, to levy or upon. Now, how to describe these three? The first one, to collect taxes, means levy by authorities by authority of law. And as a self-compliance, taxable person shall pay voluntarily on time. Second meaning is money collected as taxes. This means, according to me, after going through all these provisions, that what this other levy can be. Money collected as taxes means what? That, according to me, is deeming provisions to collect tax, such as reversal of ITC and to pay as output tax. That is not falling in section 9, but still good. If we refer the dictionary meaning, I found this deeming provision. Then third one is to levy war upon. The third one is when the authorities try to levy tax without the authority of law. You know that DRC 3, they are asking us to accept voluntarily and make that payment. When they do that, that we fit into this third dictionary meaning, that if such levy will be a war. And as a professional, we have to fight out against this unjust levy if at all we face across. Now, friends, as far as section 9 of the CGST, SGST and UTGST Act is concerned, this section 9 as well as section 5 of the IGST Act are exactly identical, except the subsection, the proviso to subsection 1 of section 5 of the IGST Act. Barring this, there is no difference. So in this entire discussion, I will discuss only about section 9. After going through this section 9, the first thing, section 9 and 5, the first thing what comes in our mind is, or that is clarified, is that CGST is to be paid on intrastate transactions and IGST for interstate transactions. Now going to section 9.1. Tax shall be levied on all intrastate supplies on the value determined under section 15 at notified rate to be collected as per rules and shall be paid by a taxable person. But that's all. That is to be paid on the interstate supplies in case of IGST on intrastate, that is interstate supplies. Now, as per section 9.3, that is a reverse charge, tax to be paid by reverse charge mechanism by the recipient of specified categories of goods, services, or both, if so notified. So we have to read that notification and find out what that notification specifies, whom to be paid to pay that tax, RCM. And section 9.4 that talks about again RCM to be paid when the recipient receives those goods or services or other supply, inward supply, from unregistered supplier. Then coming to section 9.5, tax on specified category of services to be paid by electronic commerce operator if such services are supplied through it. There are two provisos to subsection 5 of section 9, and that basically, I'm not going in detail, that basically fixes a responsibility on electronic commerce operator if he's directly dealing in those supply. If it is through someone else, then this first proviso makes him liable. If none of them have the presence in India, then the second proviso is for that they shall appoint a particular person who shall be liable to pay tax. If he doesn't do this, then obviously all his facilities to operate as a electronic commerce operator will not be provided to him. That's why that is the condition. He shall appoint a person that he will be made liable to pay tax of all such transactions. Now, as I said at the beginning, that there is only one difference between section 9 and section 5 of the IGST Act. Now, levy of IGST as per proviso to subsection 1 of section 5. IGST, why this subsection 5 of section 5? IGST on import to be levied and collected as per section 3 of Customs Act. Kindly take into account. Barring this subsection, IGST is to be paid on outward side, means outward supply. But here in this case, IGST on import to be levied and collected as per section 3 of the Customs Act. Now the taxable value to be determined under Customs Act, not under the IGST Act. At the point when custom duty is levied on said goods under section 12 of the Customs Act. So here, whenever we make import, then for the purpose of levying IGST on it, that we have to pay. For that purpose, we have to refer to Customs Act, and therefore the levy thereof will be as per the Customs Act, and that levy and the rates thereof as well would be whatever are there under the Customs Act, not under the IGST Act. Then taxable value to be determined, that also under the Customs Act, not under the IGST Act. At the point when custom duty is levied on said goods under section 12 of Customs Act. Now here the question may come. Just a minute. नाही. Now the point of time. this when to pay at the point when custom duty is levied on said goods under section 12 of the Customs Act. And therefore, we have to refer to the custom provisions, and all the judgments would come into play the time of making that payment, when these goods are actually cleared from the custom station or thereafter. All these at present I need not discuss this, but what I wish to point out at this juncture is only to say that as far as levy of IGST is concerned, as per this proviso, that shall be as per the provisions of the Customs Act. Now the next question is, as far as the levy is concerned, who shall pay that? The answer is obviously it is to be paid by like a taxable person. Who are taxable persons? Those who are registered under section 22 or 24. Under this, even a person who is voluntarily registered, though his turnover has not exceeded, he is also will be called as a taxable person. And who is the other one? Unregistered person who, even after his turnover exceeds, fails to pay the take the registration. Such unregistered person is also a taxable person. That I have not taken the registration, that's why I need not pay, that he cannot say. He has to pay that tax once his turnover exceeds the limit of say 20 lakh, 40 lakh, whatever is prescribed under the GST Act. Now the next important thing what we have to take into account is non-taxable territory and taxable territory. Now first of all, it would be better that which is the non-taxable territory. CGST section 279, if we read, that non-taxable territory for the levy of CGST is concerned, that is other than India. As far as IGST is concerned, there is no definition for non-taxable territory, so other than India. Then as per SGST, the same definition is there like CGST Act, and that's why non-taxable territory as per section 279 is other states or union territory. Now the important call before we go to actual levy of tax, the taxable territory, levy in which state or UT that is to be paid. Now CGST section 2109 subsection 109, CGST is applicable for whole of India. IGST under section 222, that also for whole of India. What matters is the definition of SGST Act section 2(109). As per that definition, taxable territory is whole of that state or union territory. And therefore, as far as central government is concerned, on any transaction, that transaction takes place in Maharashtra or say Kerala, in that case, half of the portion of CGST or IGST, CGST full, whatever has been levied, irrespective of the state, and IGST 50%, central government is going to get. But what is important, that's why here is definition of SGST Act 2(109). And for that purpose, taxable territory for a particular transaction one has to determine, and that will obviously a particular state in which that transaction is taking place. That transaction from that state may be local, may be interstate. Accordingly, that taxes will have to be paid. So to decide in which state that registration is to be taken and to which state, through which state that tax has to be paid is very important. Now, non-taxable supply. Section 2(78), supply on which no tax is leviable, in short. With this, what is taxable supply? CGST Act section 2(108), supply which is leviable to tax. In short, which is not exempted is the one means which is falling in section 278 on which no tax can be levied, that is different. Wherever is to be levied, that is section 2108 supply which is leviable to tax. And as far as IGST is concerned, taxable supply is not defined, and therefore definition under the CGST Act will be applicable to IGST Act. Now friends, as far as the levy is concerned, what we have to take into account is whether a particular transaction is intrastate supply or interstate supply. Separate definition pertaining to goods and services has been provided for. As far as goods are concerned, as per section 264, that is to be read with IGST section 8. Accordingly, in case of goods, following are not intrastate but interstate transactions. Supply to or by SEZ located in same state. Though it is located in same state, because of legal fiction, though the transaction otherwise to be treated as in the absence of this provision, that is section 8, as local, that is intrastate, but because of this legal fiction, supply to or supply from SEZ is to be treated as interstate transaction. Then goods imported till they cross custom frontiers of India, that also interstate transaction. And supply to international tourists leaving India. For this purpose, we need to read section 8.1. Now, as far as services are concerned, as per proviso to IGST section 8.2, intrastate supply of services shall not include supply to or by SEZ located in same state. Then supply in territorial waters. This is the important deviation, as by the time most of you are aware, I would say only in short about this, that as far as the supplies in territorial waters, what we normally used to call at sail in the course of high seas. In short, instead of going in detail, that section 9 speaks about it, where the just a minute now.
Yeah. Screen share हो रखी थी पीछे.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Sir, please continue.
Oh yes, sure.
Sir, please continue.
Yes, yes, sure. Now, friends, the earlier under the existing law, the question was when the supply was through the territorial waters, what we used to call it as high seas, under who has a right to have that tax. Now here, because of the special legal fiction made because of section 9, whenever such supply is in the high seas, there the nearest state in the coastal state, what is being called is coastal state or union territory, where the nearest point of the appropriate baseline is located, that state in short has a right to have those taxes. With this brief introduction about the levy, we will go to some of the issues which I am putting before you. As far as levy of tax is concerned, it is permitted basically only under section 9.1, 9.3 and 9.4 on outward or inward supply, respectively, that is output tax and RCM. Then whether following recovery or levy is according to law that we have to deal with. As per second proviso to section 16(2), if a recipient fails to pay entire consideration to the vendor, then that section 16(2) second proviso states or makes a provision that in such case the recipient shall pay that amount as output tax liability, which it was earlier claimed. Suppose I as a recipient do not accept this and simply for various reasons, then my question before in front of you is whether such levy, because of reversal of that tax which was originally taken by me as ITC, then the proper officer has to pass an order to levy this much amount as output tax liability, whether such order passed by the proper officer is valid. Here normally when we raise a question on validity, that means to challenge that. Here straight way to challenge is not so easy. The provision made is provision made. But what the point which I want to make out is the levy according to law is under section 9. Section 2 into bracket 82 provides that defines output tax means tax chargeable on taxable supply other than RCM. Section 2 into bracket 21 CGST means levied under section 9. And now second proviso to section 16(2) is a deeming fiction, as I said, to determine ITC reversed as output tax. Now that's why I'm saying this output tax has been levied, is being levied under second proviso to section 16(2), whether that is valid. Now this has to be tested on rationality. GST law does not allow bad debts. Even if I don't pay anything to my supplier, then the supplier, even though he proves under income tax, he will have a deduction for that from that income after establishing. But under the GST law is concerned, like the erstwhile sales tax law, even if I fail to pay anything to my supplier, that supplier is bound to pay output tax liability of which I have claimed ITC. And therefore, when the government now, by way of this deeming provision, asking me to reverse that ITC and pay that one as output tax liability, whether this is constitutionally valid. To say is very easy, it is not valid. But on this count, recently when the controversial act CAA was challenged, is being challenged before the Supreme Court, and the plea was being made for early hearing. The Supreme Court, while dealing with this issue, made a primary statement that Parliament, when passes any law, it is constitutional. Without that, Parliament would not have passed that enactment. Why I am saying this? When we talk about challenging this particular provision, deeming provision, to treat that one as output tax and pay that liability, when especially the supplier is not getting relieved from making the payment as output tax, this would lead to unjust enrichment to the government, because they will be taking tax from both the persons. Whether this will stand valid. As far as the law making power is concerned, Article 19 into bracket 6, the clause G of that Article 19, that clearly says that in public interest, the government has a right to make a law and have some restrictions thereon. And when the matter is being challenged on the ground of arbitrariness of the law, in that case, it would be our duty to establish that if a purchaser today he has not made the payment to the supplier in 180 days, by that where the government is going to lose the revenue. And that is why to put such condition is onerous to the purchaser. If we can convince the court that that is why this is unjust provision, then and then only this can be strike down. But in short, this is the deeming provision to levy output tax in the form of reversal of credit. Now with this, we should go to the second issue. When proper officer is reluctant to grant credit claimed in Tran 1, partly or fully, we have come across such situation. And he instructed the claimant to pay back such amount with DRC 03, which is nothing but intimation of voluntary payment or against show cause or statement. Where the recipient refused to pay such tax, the levy thereof by proper officer is under which section? That is my question. Friends, as far as the earlier issue was concerned, at least may be wrong, but the levy was under second proviso to section 16(2). But whenever I have claimed certain credit through Tran 1 and the officer, that is the proper officer under GST Act, according to him, part of the credit I am not entitled to. And that's why when he says that I should pay that amount along with interest and I should file DRC 03. According to me, DRC 03 is a dangerous proposition. We should file it only when we are fully convinced that such amount is payable, otherwise not. But normally what happens? When Tran 1 is under verification, then the officer, if says that the total credit claimed through Tran 1 is say 10 lakh rupees, and if he says 1 lakh rupees is for which you are not entitled, so you pay, file DRC 03 and we do that. But if we do that, the question is whether that is a valid levy. If we say no, then in that case he has to pass the exhaustive order, means complete order, what we call it as. But under the GST law, what I have seen is there is no provision to pass the exhaustive order by taking all the transactions into account. And there is policy also to assess transaction wise. Wherever they feel that something is payable, you pay. And mostly they say you pay by filing along with DRC 03. So according to me, first of all, if any claim made in Tran 1 that they want to reverse, first of all, they should pass the order, but they are not doing that, maybe transaction wise. Little bit with the modification, I am again going to the third proposition. When under the existing law, my return shows that there is a refund and adjusted or rather carried forward to the subsequent period. And we come across such cases accordingly when the Tran 1 is filed. At that time, what happens? Some of the officers, they issue the notice under the existing law and as well as under the GST law. According to them, for this reason or the other, more or less, that is because of 48(5) of the section 48(5) of the earlier law, as the supplier has not paid the tax, that's why you were not entitled for that ITC. Therefore, the last return, which is shown as refundable and carried forward to subsequent period, is not valid. according to me, as far as GST is concerned, even under assumption that credit means that amount of refund, partly or fully, assuming it is bogus or ineligible for X, Y, or Z reason. In that case, as far as GST is concerned, that GST proper officer has to see only the last return and whether that return basically is genuine or not. Means that is not fabricated return. If that return may be under VAT law or maybe under excise, maybe under service tax, so long as it is showing the amount refundable and being carried forward to the subsequent period, then as far as GST is concerned, he has no right to touch to the correctness of that return which is filed. At the most, if the GST officer makes his opinion primarily that that carry forward made under the existing law is not correct, he shall inform to the existing officer under the existing act, that is say VAT or excise or service tax. But here it is happening. Again, they are asking, that the GST officer is asking that you pay that tax amount, whatever he points out, and pay that and file DRC 3. I have come across a case where they have forced our client to pay tax along with interest under GST, as well as they have raised some demand under the VAT Act as well. That is absolutely incorrect, and therefore in such case only the VAT officer or say excise officer under the old law has a right to call you for assessment, and if that claim is correct, then he has to allow that. So automatically Tran 1, which has to be allowed, that is my proposition, under the GST law, and under the old law, either he will allow that claim or he will make a demand by making an assessment order under the old law, not otherwise. With this, friends, I am going to the another subtopic, I can say, that is classification, that is rate of tax. As I stated, that section 9 is a charging section, and as per section 9, that may be a tax to be paid as output tax or maybe RCM, that is to be paid as specified by the government by issuing a notification. But when I read this chapter, that is chapter 3 of the CGST Act, that under that levy of tax, that chapter, even section 10, where what we call it as composition, that also comes, and section 11. Section 11 empowers the government to levy tax at concessional rate, and that is why we found that the notification to levy lesser amount of tax to the builder or other a developer, that notification was issued under section 11, and therefore when these notifications were issued, I was under initial impression, when I was not going deeply, that the notification will always be under section 9, but that is not so. And therefore when we refer to the first notification under GST era issued, that is notification number 1 for goods dated 28 June 2017, and as far as services are concerned, notification number 11 was issued dated 28 June 2017. As far as notification number 1 for goods is concerned, that was issued by exercising the powers conferred by section 9(1) to notify various rates for various goods. As far as that notification is concerned, that says description, what is the rate of tax and what goods are covered in respect of goods specified in schedules appended to it, the description of which is specified in the corresponding entry in column 3 of the said schedule. This is not new to us. The description is given under each entry what type of goods are covered. But in column 2, the tariff, subheading, heading or chapters have been given, and the explanation 3 and 4 given below this notification has clarified two things. That is clarified that the tariff item, subheading, heading, etc. are as per the first schedule to the Custom Tariff Act 1975. And when the issue of interpretation comes, the rules for interpretation as per the Custom Tariff Act, the chapter note, etc. will come into picture. As far as the notification for services is concerned, if we see notification number 20 June 2017, as far as description of services is concerned, yes, in every entry, obviously there is a description. But that is to be read along with the SAC, service account codes. And that is for the first time as far as the services are concerned. These service accounting codes have been made applicable to the GST Act. Then first thing it came to my mind that this SAC, classification of services, scheme of classification of services. As far as HSN is concerned, we are aware. But as far as SAC is concerned, where from this scheme came from? Then I inquire with my colleagues by putting a message on the WhatsApp that whether this classification of services was adopted under the service tax era. I got the answer, obviously no. But that means for the first time that scheme of classification of services has been linked to levy tax on any service under the GST law. Then friends, with this, by keeping these two things in mind, that as far as the interpretation or to find out the rate of tax is concerned, as far as goods is concerned, we have to refer always also to the Custom Tariff Act. And as far as the levy of services are concerned, we have to refer to scheme of, that is SAC, what we call it as. With this, the first issue, as far as the levy of the classification, the rate of tax is concerned regarding goods. As we know that for every entry, there is a description of goods covered. So my first question is, the description, which one is important? Whether given under HSN, under custom tariff, or the notification issued under GST Act. As far as my view is concerned, what is supreme is the description given under the respective entry of GST notification would prevail. HSN and custom tariff are helpful to understand what the relevant goods are. If the goods are of not of a general use, obviously we refer to the custom tariff or HSN to understand. Suppose furniture, what is the meaning of furniture? Then it is always, and if our notification entry, suppose it says furniture, then if we go to HSN or custom tariffs, then the furniture has been defined by various ways because of that codes or tariff heading given over there. Qua that is important. But the description which is given here under the notification, the first our attempt should be to find out from that description given under GST notification, under which whether the goods in hand are covered under this specific entry or not. Therefore, where there is no clarity about the description given and interpretation is required, explanation 4 of the notification provides that in such case, interpretation rules under the Customs Act. Then, as far as that first schedule is concerned, the general explanatory notes and under Custom Tariff Act, under every chapter, there are explanatory notes. These are required to be taken into account to understand what that product is. And therefore, again and again, as far as this issue is concerned, why I am raising this issue? Because as I said, the chapter headings are important to compare that description, go to that respective heading and finding out what type of goods are covered under this particular kind of a description. That's the issue. And here with this, as far as my conclusion is concerned, suppose it may happen that the description given under the GST notification is something different than under the respective chapter head of the Custom Tariff Act, which is now used for the purpose of the GST Act, GST notification. Then in that case, whatever has been covered under this description, those goods only will be covered. Now with this, I am going to the next issue. That is, say for example, when I only said that the description given, that is prima facie to be used and that will lead as a supreme, as I said. I am taking the entry for the for drugs, medicines, what we usually call it. Now such entries, I am not going to read each and every word of that entry. There it is said drugs sold under license issued by drugs and control authorities. Now I come across a case under the old law that where the business of that particular dealer was to import those drugs and sell it. And for that also license is required, import license for drugs. But that period was 7-8 and the license he applied and obtained from the year 8-9. So now the question came in the year 2007-8, whether when the medicines are sold, about that there is no doubt, drugs, but at that time he was not holding license. Now the question comes, the entry says, the description says, drugs sold under license issued by the Drugs and Cosmetic Authorities under that act. Now the question is, when it is sold without that license, the commodity, which is otherwise a medicine or a drug, can be held as no drug. That is a proposition in front of you. According to me, no. Only that should be rationally taken by the authorities, and in that way that is to be treated as redundant, that sold under license, you are holding a license or not. Now the next question. There may be, when we under GST, when we always speak about two things, that chapter heading number and as far as services are concerned, SAC. Now take up a case that a particular taxable person is a reseller, but he is importing the goods. Most of the time what happens, or earlier, and the earlier era also happened, we have also seen that when there is import, even today, we have seen that as per provided to section 5(1), that levy of IGST is as per the Customs Act. And if that officer of customs, while preparing a bill of entry for import, put the heading under the Customs Act, say X, and that is a taxable person under GST Act, knows that heading should be Y, not X. But now normally what happens? When we go before any authority, they say, give us the additional evidence. According to me, if it is mismatching, it is better not to give such evidence. As far as possible, you avoid that. Because ultimately, the chapter heads, as I stated at the beginning, are there only for the purpose of reference to find out what those goods are. And therefore, in a case in hand, which I have explained to you, that on bill of entry, the chapter head mentioned is X, actually it is Y. And if Y is taken into account, then GST to be paid is more. The entry is like that. Then in that case, what is to be done? Now this is again another Pandorum box of mismatch. According to me, what is sold is important, what is supplied is important, and that is why once we prove that these commodities are falling under a particular description, that obviously we have to prove, then the bill of entry is showing something else, that chapter head, that should not make any difference, but we have to prove that as per this description, these goods are fitting into. Now for this purpose, there are three principles. Under the Excise Act, yes, there are judgments. Under the old era, obviously, Excise Act, that if a manufacturer put the description X, the reseller cannot change the description. According to me, those judgments cannot be made applicable to this GST Act, because under GST, everyone is liable to pay tax. On outward supply, the reseller is also liable to pay tax. That's why he has to find out which is the correct heading. When that heading, and accordingly the correct heading he has to put in on his sales invoice. No matter the supplier has put a wrong heading. That is my proposition to this. Then second one, even take up a case, I have sold good X which are liable to say 6% tax. But I am not aware whether for that a particular heading this is correct or that correct. And I am not in a position to put exactly which heading should be. Then the legal principle says that the burden to levy tax on is on whom? That is on the assessing officer. And that is why when I am not in a position to give that evidence by producing the bills, sales invoices from other suppliers of the same kind of business, then the officer, even if he decides to pass an ex parte order, once the sample of the goods are put in front of him, can he say that as I have not proved with outer evidence that what is that means the suppliers invoices etc., then he will levy tax by saying that I have not given the evidence of showing the correct head used by others. That he cannot be, because burden to assess the correct rate of tax is on the officer concerned, and that is why he has to find out from his expertise what would be the appropriate heading. No matter, even in my sales invoice, I have used a wrong heading. So long as I have explained everything about that product, even the usage thereof, it is the burden on the officer concerned to find out the correct head of that product and decide the rate of tax. Now the another principle is, suppose there are any goods or services which are being capable of being falling under two different entries. One is say for 6%, another is for 12%. Then in that case, as far as the judge-made law is concerned, there are two laws. One is the Bayer Act and other one is the what we commonly call it as case law, but that is nothing but judge-made law. Under such circumstances, where the same product or same service falls in two entries, then the entry beneficial to the supplier shall be applied. That is one more principle. Many times the question comes that when we talk about the decisions given by advance ruling authorities, as that respective section itself says that a particular decision given by the advance ruling authority is applicable to that taxable person only. That is why I am putting some of the decisions in front of you, that I do understand that the binding of a particular decision given by, say, High Court is binding on all the subordinate tribunals and all the authorities. But the decision given by one advance authority is not applicable to another advance ruling authority. And that is why the Maharashtra Advance Authority held that the rate on particular supply is X. The other authority may say, no, it can't be. But here, if every authority uses his own discretion and deal with the same kind of supply in a different manner, then we have to take some of the things or the judgments into account, whereby the main principle, whatever has been held, I think instead of reading all those judgments, it would be better. In short, these judgments were on the issue of revision. What that revision was, that by you cannot change as a revenue authority, you cannot change your stand from this year to another year, from this dealer to that dealer. And whenever you want to change your stand, at that time, there must be 10% convincing reasons as to why you are changing that decision which was given earlier. And therefore, those principles which were laid down are very much important, though they are related to review. I would circulate them later on, not here, but through our association. But in short, to have the consistency in the law, those rulings have been laid down by the Supreme Court, that if in day out, if you are going to change your view, there will be a mockery. And that is why, even though that section 99 about advance ruling says that that particular decision is applicable to that particular taxable person only, they cannot, as per their whims, apply a different provisions and held otherwise. That's why this I have pointed out before you all. With this, I think the last proposition on this particular issue is that whenever any decision comes from any advance ruling authority, at that time, as normally the procedure is being followed, what I have seen at the sales tax tribunal, when any decision comes, the revenue officer puts that decision before the Joint Commissioner headquarters and takes his approval whether this particular decision is to be accepted or not. If it is not to be accepted of a decision given by the tribunal, then that Joint Commissioner or whosoever is the highest authority gives the decision on that point, and they decide either to go to High Court or not against that tribunal order. In the same manner, the representation should be made to the GST Council that at least when a decision given by any advance ruling authority or appellate advance ruling authority, then that must go to the highest authority under the GST law, who will have a affirmation on it that this decision is acceptable to be the revenue or not. Otherwise, under the same set of facts, I will take a decision in a particular manner and all others may take the decision in some other manner. With this, I think, as far as this subject is concerned, levy and rate of tax, initial part I'm completing with, and I'm requesting the organizer to make this open for the questions to be raised by the participants.
Thank you very much, sir. So those participants who have asked your questions, I will leave it open for you. I will unmute you from here. You can unmute yourself and you can ask the question directly as Mr. Bapar wanted that way. So let us do it accordingly. We have a first question from Mr. Rajkiran Solanki.
मला इथे unmute कर. Just a minute.
Yes, Mr. Rajkiran, you need to unmute yourself. Can you do that?
Hello.
Are you there, Mr. Rajkiran? Yes, you can go ahead with your question. Mr. Rajkiran, are you there? I think he's I'll take his question. His question is that when goods are sold from A in Mumbai to B in Mumbai, but delivered to his workplace at Gujarat, so whether CGST and SGST has to be levied or IGST has to be levied, and also explain A in Mumbai and B in Gujarat, and delivered in Mumbai, what to charge? IGST, CGST or SGST?
For my understanding again, the query is that A and B both are situated in Maharashtra.
Both are in Maharashtra, and goods are delivered to his place at Gujarat.
At Gujarat.
Yes.
As far as the deeming provision is concerned, in that case, the person, that second person has received the good to be taken as received actually the goods. As far as the location of supplier is concerned, he is from Maharashtra and the place of supply is actually the state of Gujarat.
Yes.
And that is why this has to be treated as interstate sale.
So IGST needs to be levied on that.
To be charged. And what was the subsequent query in this?
Same thing, that what would be levied on that? IGST, CGST or SGST?
That is IGST being interstate transaction.
Okay, thank you, sir. Now the next one is by Mr. Paresh Mange. He is not there right now, but his question, I will read it out. Whether it is clear that we have to pay back ITC taken if the amount is not paid to suppliers within 180 days. Do we have to return ITC?
Return to whom?
Do we have to pay back the ITC taken if the amount is not paid to the suppliers? If we do not pay to the suppliers?
As far as that plain provision is concerned, that is second proviso to section 16(2). That I have answered, but I will have to repeat now. That if I fail, recipient fails to pay that consideration, entire consideration, to the supplier in 180 days, then that proviso says that has to be paid by the recipient as if treating that one as output tax liability. But for the reason I said that this will be taken as unjust enrichment, government will get tax from both the angles, from both the persons. And that is why, as far as this provision is concerned, I say that that is not a rational provision, and that shall be challenged. And of course, when that order will be passed by the authority, when I, as a recipient, refuse to pay that amount on the simple ground that by deeming fiction, you cannot levy the tax on a transaction which is not a supply. Because as far as section 9(1) is concerned, tax is to be paid on outward supply transactions. This is not outward supply transactions. And that is why you cannot, by legal fiction, introduce some provision whereby the tax can be levied. That is my answer to this.
Okay. So now we have Mr. Ramesh Verma. He wants to ask a question. I've already unmuted him. Mr. Ramesh, are you there?
Yeah,
Yes, you can talk.
in the earlier question, advocate told that in first case where the seller and purchaser is in Maharashtra and goods are supplied outside the state, he told that IGST will be applicable, but not it is the case because both are in the same state. Of course, goods are delivered outside, but only CGST and SG applicable, not the IGST. Please check and comment.
On this issue, I may request someone else also to join for as far as this one is concerned.
I am 100% sure. Right.
Okay.
I am 100%. I am retired from the department also. I am 100% sure for that. Okay.
But in that case, which one you take as a place of supply?
Because buyer and the seller both are situated in the same state, of course, goods are delivered. We have to see whether the buyer and seller in the same state, outside the state for applicability. We have to go the provision of IGST Act section 3 or whichever the levy section is there. You can find that if the both are in the same state, then the CGST applicable, not the IGST. You can check it from the IGST section provision, right? Thank you.
With this proposition, should we go ahead?
Yes, okay. The next question is by Mr. Yogesh Gokhale. And he said, is unregistered person, say cooperative society, which is not registered under GST, need to pay GST on reverse charge mechanism basis on fees payable to advocates?
To be very honest with you, as far as these provisions are concerned, I am not much comfortable. Let me admit. That's why, as far as when these levies were concerned, I was on a main provisions. That is under what kind of transactions, whether a particular supply is a supply or not. If it is a supply, then inward or outward, depending on that, whether output tax liability or RCM, what the question is. And that's why, to be very honest with you, to answer about this RCM, that is entirely a special subject. And as you know that regarding the cooperative societies, whether that mutuality principles, this and that all comes into picture. There are adverse decisions also on that issue. And that is why in this scenario, as far as this webinar is concerned, I would be happy that if someone else join on this particular issue.
Sir, I feel, but then those who are not registered under GST, reverse charge mechanism will not work, and especially for advocate fees, only if that.
What was the question? May I ask what was the question?
The question is that a cooperative, so say any unregistered person or any cooperative society which is not registered under GST, they need to pay GST on reverse charge mechanism for advocate fees.
Oh,
They
first of all,
have to.
yes, please. Yes, Dinesh.
First of all, they will have to conclude whether they are liable to GST. If they are, see, GST, they have to take a charge. They have to take a stand because the AR decided that decided against the assessee, against the cooperative societies, and then in that case, that cooperative societies will have to first take a stand whether they should go by that AR or to refuse to go by that AR. If they go by that AR, they have to pay tax on the services received from advocates. But if they would not go by that AR, I don't think they have to pay tax on the fees received from advocates. That is what is my understanding. Someone may differ from that.
This means I would only add one thing is this, as the query was that society is not registered. So here the question is, only because it is not registered, it cannot do away from paying RCM if that society is basically liable to pay tax, in the sense if its supply exceeds that limit, statutory limit, then it has to take registration, but subject to the explanation given by our president that on the concept of mutuality and all other things, by taking that all those AR on this issue into account, first of all, one has to fix whether that society is required to take registration or not. If the answer is yes, then even though it remains unregistered, it has to pay us. That can be the answer.
Correct.
Okay. Then next, there is a question from Mr. Rajesh Srisat. Mr. Rajesh, would you like to ask personally? Mr. Rajesh, are you there? Okay, I will read it out. In the case of a company who is selling material to X company, who is also having a place in same factory premises in the case, can he sell the material with invoice without creating e-way bill when the amount of supply is more than 2 lakhs? It's the case of a company who is selling materials to X company, who is also having place in the same factory. Say X and Y are in the same factory. Can he sell the material with invoice without creating e-way bill when the amount of supply is more than 2 lakhs?
As far as the movement is from the same place, that is why only the answer, right? The answer is
they are in the same premises. X and Y are in the same premises.
The same thing, and the honest admission is that as far as such issues are concerned, which are altogether a different subject, in the sense that as far as the e-way bill is concerned. So here again, I would request someone to add. Even Sejal, you are the expert on this.
So e-way bill, I think Sir Dinesh sir can take it up.
Because
that is altogether, as you know.
I didn't hear the question. What was the question? Sorry, I was not attentive.
Yeah, so the question is that Mr. X and Y are in the same premises, both the factories in the same premises, and X is selling goods to Y, but the value of supply is more than 2 lakhs. So does he need to make his invoice with the e-way bill? Does he need to make an e-way bill?
Is there movement of goods? Is there vehicle used? Motor vehicle used? If the motor vehicle is not used, then there is no question of e-way bill. If motor vehicle is used, then only question of e-way bill comes into picture. So there is no requirement of e-way bill.
And even the distance, that factor will also come.
वो मालूम है ना पहले वो WhatsApp पे हाथ गाड़ी आता था, e-way bill इंट्रोड्यूस हो गया तो घोड़ा गाड़ी आता था, क्योंकि घोड़ा गाड़ी और हाथ गाड़ी को e-way bill नहीं लगता है, तो सेम प्रीमाइसेस में होगा, तो मोटर व्हीकल क्या को यूज करेगा, तो e-way bill नहीं लगेगा.
Okay. Now the next one is in the current query. If part payment made within 180 days because law donor says entire consideration. What is this? This is, I think, the case of that 180 days, sir. If part payment is done in that case, does he have to reverse it to the supplier? If he has not made the full payment, he has done part payment.
No, first of all,
In the previous question,
to the supplier or not, that is not the question. Here, really, the question is whether that ITC is to be reversed partly or fully. That is the question. On the ground that I failed to pay full or part of the amount to the supplier in 180 days. So paying back to the supplier doesn't come because that's statutory liability, not under the GST Act, but under the contract. I'm supposed to pay that consideration today or tomorrow. So that has nothing to do with this provision that is to be paid as output tax liability.
Okay, I think that was satisfactory. Now we have Mr. Bharat Dudani. Mr. Bharat Dudani, would you like to ask a question? This is regarding a motor training school. Are you there, Mr. Bharat? Mr. Bharat, okay, I'll take his question that his client is running a motor training school. Is he liable to pay GST on fees levied by him? So the
I would
question
make
is,
one thing over very much clear over here. No, I follow that.
yeah,
But
okay.
overall, the questions which are coming over here that I have, these are not falling in this particular topic. When the
Okay.
question is levy of tax and taxation means rate of tax, I have not touched two things in my entire lecture. Whether a particular supply is a supply or not, that is altogether out of my topic today. Number one.
Yeah, entirely
And
different.
other than the rate of tax, like no, even particular transaction is interstate or intrastate. I have cursorily discussed that one. But whether under the given circumstances, just like the another question was, whether this is interstate or the local one, levy and classification of tax, because that mindset is also important for this purpose, and that's why whether that particular fee is a supply or not, that is a definitely a separate topic, and that's why here at this juncture I don't want to go into that because we have to stick to two things.
Just to hello.
We will take
May I interrupt little in this?
them personally on the email.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
May I interrupt little in this? May I interrupt? Hello. The one question which was regarding the place of supply, that when both the persons are located in Maharashtra and the delivery of the goods is in the out of Maharashtra, in that case, place of supply would be the principal place of supply, place of business of the person, second person, and not the place where the goods are actually delivered. That is there under section 10 of IGST Act. Just to avoid confusion, and one more request: when we would organize webinar, it will be my request to all the participants and even to the organizing committee when we are here to look to that the person or the participants would ask only the questions which are there relating to the topic, because it is not that all the time we are prepared to answer each and every or the any kind of questions. Let us take up only those questions which would be related to the topic so that it will be convenient to answer accurately.
Okay, so we'll take up one on invoices. That is correct.
Sorry?
I have not heard.
Yeah, when we'll check with this one, when ITC can be taken date of invoice or date of receipt of goods if both are in different month. When ITC
The
can be
voice is
taken.
breaking.
When should ITC be taken? If the date of invoice.
Ask Bapat Sahab to check his internet connectivity. Ask Bapat Sahab to check his internet connectivity. I think there is some internet problem.
But no, I hear you, but not to Sejal.
So you can hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you, Sejal.
I can hear you, but sir, can you hear me?
Bapat sir, can you hear us? Bapat sir?
Yes, yes. Now I can hear us. Please repeat.
Yeah, so
Okay.
the question is about
Uh-huh.
when ITC, Manju, can you just check the internet connection at your, now it's clear. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Now, yes, yes. Now it is clear.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, the question is when ITC has to be taken if the date of receipt of goods, 1 minute, yeah, I'll just take it
Hmm.
from when ITC can be taken if the date of invoice or the date of receipts of goods, if both are in different months.
First of all, again, though it is not on this subject, this is on ITC, but
Okay,
still I need not apply my mind
I
much.
think that's all.
What?
Yeah, I think that's all from the
Uh,
related questions. Yeah.
if you would go actually by the provisions of law, as per my interpretation, you can take ITC only on the receipt of goods. You cannot take ITC unless the goods are received by you.
So
In
I
short,
think
not all conditions which have been fixed. One of the condition is not only the date of invoice, but the goods must be actually received, goods or
Yes,
service.
sir. Correct. Correct.
Received that month, as rightly stated by Mr. Tamde, in that month it can be done.
yeah. Okay. So I think that's all for now. And yes. Yes, sir. Then there are 1 or 2 on cooperative. I think we'll not take those, and that can be taken as and when the topics will be coming. We will take up in seminars. But sir, now we have. I request Mr. Alok Mehta to do a vote of
Sir,
thanks.
sir,
Uh-huh.
Sejal madam, I have to say something. I think
Yes.
we are over with queries, right? We are over with queries.
Yes, we are over with the
Yeah.
queries.
Yeah. Sir, Bapat sir, the only one thing which I had to say in this webinar, you discussed about the making representation with regard to the AR decisions given by the authorities are to be made final, or the same decisions are to be adopted by all the authorities. Was that the correct interpretation of what you said?
No, I say that why I said about the representation. As I referred to the judgment of the Supreme Court, that there must be a
Mm,
consistency on the topic where I am today about the levy of
mm,
tax. A particular stand
mm,
taken by the revenue
mm,
that cannot be
mm,
changed unless the
mm,
circumstances so demands, or
mm,
where the earlier decision which was taken was
mm,
obtained by a misrepresentation
mm,
of the facts.
mm.
Therefore, unless the that I will share those decisions with you.
No,
That
I
Supreme.
understood. So you meant to
Uh,
say the one decision which is given in particular AR should be adopted by all the authorities and should be made applicable in all the cases.
what I mean is, I know practical. My purpose of my saying is that a decision given by authority A, look to the importance of that section, advanced ruling authority. Once the decision
Mm,
is given by authority A, say of Maharashtra, and if it
mm,
is that because of that section, if any different authority again takes a different view and gives another decision, say on the rate of tax for
mm,
which we are today,
mm,
right? That's why I'm
mm,
referring
mm,
only to rate of
mm,
tax at present.
mm,
But what
mm,
the Supreme Court
mm,
has held in that case,
mm,
that when we say now, when the one nation, one tax, and if
mm,
qua
mm,
that,
mm,
if the government says that we have already provided in the section that the AA are given
mm,
by a particular, in
mm,
case of a particular taxable person, that is applicable to
mm,
him, and therefore
mm,
under same set of facts, same type
mm,
of supply made of a particular goods or a particular service. In that
mm,
case, another authority starts taking another view. So there must be
mm,
some mechanism to
mm,
finally accept or reject that decision. Otherwise, there will be multiplicity of decisions given, and that is why, as you know, there is a mechanism, means provision under the law for a prospective overruling. In the sense, why I am saying prospective overruling, that the person, a particular decision is given by authority of, say, Maharashtra, that on this particular item tax rate is 10%. In that case, if any other authority given this decision, which is approved finally by the GST Council, means whosoever is the supreme authority, if that decision change, then there will be a legal protection to all those who have relied on that decision. And therefore, there must be a mechanism under this law, that is entire GST law, whereby during a given time, that decision given by the AAR has been accepted or rejected. If they reject, then there should be a provision to file appeal against that division to the tribunal or any other appropriate appellate authority provided under that, to have a uniformity basis on that decision, I am saying. Because here is a question of view taken.
Yeah, because sorry to differ in opinion with you, because according to me, we are seeing that we are not getting any. Most of the ARs are not favorable to the assessees, and if we say that the decision taken in one AR should be adopted by all the authorities, because they will not, I don't think that they will say anything which is in favor of the revenue. They would not adopt. It will not happen. They will adopt all the ARs, those which are negative, and those which are not in favor of revenue, they are going in appellate AR, they are doing that. So I don't think that according to me, it will not be advisable, because in my case, suppose some AR comes against me or non-favorable, it will not be applicable in favor of Sejal or Alok, though they would be similarly situated. But if they do this kind of amendment, this will affect to all other assessees, and it will not be advisable. But we don't know what kind of if we make representation and what kind of result comes out. So I am of the different opinion. I'm sorry to say that. Yeah, I just wanted to understand what you exactly want to say.
This is only from that point of view. So that is a suggestion only to have the scheme of the act getting settled. That is only the purpose.
Okay.
It is better that it doesn't settle as far as ARs are concerned.
Oh, that is right. That's why I only gave the example of a tribunal dispute. But explained, that is a view expressed. So no importance is given to it.
That's fine.
Now law as on today is this. Though the that respective section says that is applicable to that respective person, so long as my facts are that the same, I am going to cite those decisions that on this basis this should be.
Correct. Yeah. Chalo, vote of thanks, Sejal. Who is going to give vote of thanks?
Email it to Mr. Bapat, and those will be answered by him later on. Yes. Can we have now Alok Mehta? Can you start with the vote of thanks?
So on behalf of GSTPM, I thank you to see Advocate Deepak Bapat for taking such a very nice presentation. He has taken each and every provision very minutely. Thank you very much, sir, for sharing your knowledge and experience to all of you in lockdown period. And really, we gained the knowledge from you, and hope that all participant attendee also would have got the knowledge. I thank you to all attendee who have taken a pain to attend this lecture. Thank you very much once again. Thank you, President Dinesh Tambre, for your very nice opening remarks. Thanks to our Sejal Shah and Hiral Shah for organizing such a good webinar and put it to all of you and all. Thank you once again from GSTPM. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Bapat sir.
Thank you.